We've been waiting a long time for a very good flight game on PSVR2, and when Project Wingman turned out to be not that, we set our sights on both Gaijin's Aces of Thunder and Ultrawings 2 as the only two other titles that would bring the flight gameplay that we wanted to the PSVR2 headset. But has it lived up to the hype that everybody has kind of gathered around it and the devs have gathered around it themselves? Well, before we talk about that, if you don't know what Ultrawings 2 is and what content is in it, here's a quick rundown. Ultrawings 2 is a bit of a mix of a simulation and arcade flight game. All the dials and buttons in all 6 aircraft work as they should, and you have hundreds of missions varying between each one, where you either take down enemy aircraft, race through hoops, shoot down balloons, attempt landing challenges, and more. All of this is done through either motion controls or through the DualSense if you prefer that, with various islands to explore around an archipelago, with options to fly at day, night, dusk, and in overcast conditions. And overall, for the price of £16 here in the UK and $20 in the US, Ultrawings 2 is a pretty fun and competent flying game. However, the game was weirdly released early, which is kind of confusing, which does explain why there were no review codes sent out in the week before or anything like that. I've just got my hands on the game by purchasing it the same as you guys for this one, because Sony apparently just put this game out without really warning the devs, which I really don't understand why they would do such a thing. Maybe there was miscommunication, or maybe there was no communication at all between Sony and these devs. I honestly don't know. But the only issue with the game apparently that's being patched soon is that HOTAS don't really work that well with it. I think twisting is inverted with HOTAS. So if you're looking to buy this game with the intention of using a flight controller or stick with it, I would say wait a week. That's what the devs are saying for a time frame for release of a patch to fix all this. But the rest of the game is extensively tested. It looks decent, it runs great, and it is an incredibly fun experience. On the visuals front, this is running I think 90 Hz on reprojected, so it looks incredibly smooth in the headset. The textures are pretty damn good. It's a very simple looking game, don't get me wrong. It reminds me a bit of Simple Planes on Steam, which is a game where you create your own planes, but has a similar aesthetic. However, each island is packed with quite a bit of detail, like cars moving around, various buildings, and although there is a bit of shimmer and aliasing on far objects, the close-up stuff and the medium stuff looks really good, and the game does sell you on the sense of scale that you're flying really high above the islands, which did trigger my fear of heights a couple times, which is always a good sign in terms of immersion. Controls were a big surprise in terms of how good they feel, because it uses a different version of stick controls than No Man's Sky. In No Man's Sky, the joystick you're using in the cockpit of the spaceships you're flying is essentially locked to one position. The pivoting point is at the base of the joystick, meaning you'll have to kind of tilt your wrist to turn the way you want to, whereas it's a more traditional flight stick in the cockpits of Ultrawings 2, meaning you've got a lot more leeway with the joystick to turn and to roll, and it feels a lot better here, combined with the fact that every time you move the joystick a little bit, you get a little bit of haptic feedback, and using this haptic feedback, you can tell where the joystick is and how far you've moved it, which quickly turns into very good muscle memory, and I think that's awesome. And if it turns out you don't want to use the PSVR2 Sense controllers, even though they do have some great haptics and they work really well with pushing all the buttons in the cockpit and everything interacts brilliantly in there, by the way. The game teaches you how to turn on your different fuel gauges and actually flip on the aircraft and get going, which I think is really immersive and I didn't expect from a game of this indie budget. But if you don't want to do all that, you can use the normal DualSense and just take off with that, which is a great accessibility feature. I'll always applaud devs who throw these kind of things into the game. Same with No Man's Sky, you can now fly using a DualSense on that game, and the same is present here, which is always appreciated. The gameplay is also not as shallow as I thought it would be. The physics here are really good in terms of simulating the aircraft's weight and the movement, and the challenges are genuinely a lot of fun. I really enjoyed weaving between obstacles and diving through checkpoints to try and get good times, and especially the landing challenges at the end of each section that you do. It's kind of terrifying when you're coming in too hot and you have to try and save a landing, but when you do nail a really smooth and good landing, it feels great. And the physics really help reinforce the idea that you're flying a machine that is quite weighty, and if you cut off, say, your fuel supply by accident, or you shut off your engines by accident, or make a slight error, you're going to lose control and physics will take over and bring you down to the ground. There's also free flight, which is kind of a must-have for any flying game for me. Let me play around with the planes to my own heart's content, with no goal, no objective, and just let me relax in these environments. And that's exactly what you can do here in free flight. I really want to thank the devs for putting this in the game, because it genuinely is such an overlooked feature sometimes in these flying sims. I'm glad Ace Combat 7 had it, and I'm very glad that Ultrawings 2 has it. After the disappointment of Project Wingman, I'm quite happy with Ultrawings 2. It sure is an indie effort at making a game like this, but they knew their limits, they selected a visual style that fits to their budget, and I think they pulled it off pretty well. I'd rather a game like this any day over Project Wingman, which seemed too ambitious and also half-assed somehow. I do have to say though, in the opening menu, when you actually select which task and job you want to do, the controls are a little weird. Pushing left and right on both sticks turns you, which is really odd. It doesn't strafe you with the left stick, but you can move around your office pretty easily once you get used to it. It's just a bit of a weird control setup and there's no way of changing that, but you're not spending too much time in the starting office anyway, so the main controls in the actual cockpit of the aircraft are brilliant, so I don't really have much to complain about there. So overall, I was hoping that Ultrawings 2 would be a game to tide me over until Aces of Thunder, or to tide me over until, say, Ace Combat 8 gets announced. However, I think it's not going to be that. I think it's going to be quite a good companion piece to those. It's going for a very different visual style and different kind of gameplay, and I appreciate that. Although it does also have multiplayer PvP aspects if you want to jump in and do that, which is also really surprising to me. That's a really cool feature to have, and there's also Spec Ops missions where you take on AI planes. So if you're really looking at this game for the combat, then it also has you covered on that front, which I was, again, very surprised by, but it's a welcome addition nonetheless. Anyway, Ultrawings 2, have you played it? If you have, what did you think of it? Please do let me know in the comments below. Will you end up picking it up, do you think, if you haven't got it already? Again, let me know, and thank you all for watching. If you did enjoy, feel free to like and subscribe, and I hope to see you all in the next video.